Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Lou Pauly. I'm the mayor of the city of Issaquah, and I just want to start out by welcoming you all here today. We're going to have a briefing on the Mountains of Sound Greenway National Heritage Area. And maybe what we could do is do a little bit of round robin. I'll try and follow through the squares and introduce ourselves and talk about our city. Let's start with Angela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Becca Kettenberg. I'm the Education Program Manager here at the Greenway Trust. And for the last, coming up on a year now, have been supporting the National Heritage Area planning process.
My name is Tor Bell. I'm the Operations Director with the Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust and also helping support the NHA effort.
And I'm John Hoekstra. I'm the Executive Director of the Greenway Trust, and also add my thanks for all of you making some time to hear this briefing. And I really look forward to sharing what's going on in the NHA.
This is great. Thank you, John, and thank you to all the great Mountains of Sound Greenway staff that are here today. I'm very proud to host this briefing with other city leaders across the Mountains of Sound Greenway. Issaquah has been a close partner with the Greenway Trust from its beginning 30 years ago, collaborating on conservation, restoration, parks and trails, and other projects that have enhanced our city and contributed to the quality of life we enjoy all across the Mountains to Sound Greenway. Now that the Greenway has been designated a National Heritage Area, I think we will have even more opportunities to protect the natural beauty and resources of the Greenway, but to also preserve and celebrate the rich heritage of the communities in the region. I'm now pleased to introduce John Hoekstra, Executive Director of the Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust, who will share more information about the Greenway, the National Heritage Area designation, and a preview of the draft management plan that the Greenway Trust has been developing. And there will be some time afterwards to ask questions and share initial feedback. John.
Thanks so much, Mayor Pauly. And thanks again, everybody. I'm gonna fumble with my computer. A slide deck. As Mayor Pauly said, I want to take time. There are four things that I'd like to do with you all today. In introduction to the Mountains of Sound Greenway, I was keeping a list of cities. You know, the Greenway Trust has been really proud to work with many of your cities, but some of you are maybe a little bit new or less familiar with the Greenway and the Greenway Trust. So I want to give a little bit of an introduction. And then say a bit more about the National Heritage Area designation and what does that mean? Why do we think it's important and something to celebrate? And then I'll give an overview of the planning process, and then most excited to share with you all a preview of the management plan, which we'll be distributing a draft for review sometime hopefully next week. Depending on how much Becca and I can get done in the next few days. So we look forward to sharing the whole plan with you. And really this is meant to be a chance to kind of bring you up to speed on what's been happening, give you an idea of what's going to be in the plan. And if there are people other that you want to make sure see this plan, you'll kind of know it's coming. So I do have a couple of spots where I'll pause, make sure I pause to see if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share. We'll also reserve some time for some breakout. We're a big enough group, we'll bounce into some smaller breakout rooms just to have, we've got some questions that we want to pose to all of you, and we hope that you'll have some initial reactions and thoughts and questions and comments that we'll welcome in the breakout. That said, feel free to interrupt me, either by just speaking over me or throwing some things into the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye. But I've got, it might take me about a half an hour to work through the slide deck, but I'd like to give you this introduction so that you've got kind of a grounding in a sense of what the NHA designation and planning process is about, and that'll hopefully prompt some good questions and discussion. So. With that, in introduction to the Mountains of Sound Greenway is the landscape you see on this map, and it spans about 1.5 million acres that stretch from the hayfields and the foothills around Ellensburg up the Upper Yakima drainage to the crest of the Cascades at Snoqualmie Pass, and then down through the Snoqualmie River Valley, the Cedar River Valley, into the metropolitan area around Seattle and Bellevue to the Puget Sound waterfront. And it's an extraordinary landscape. If you just think about the different kind of ecosystems and cultural feeling of all those places, it's all packed into this relatively small area that includes the fastest growing metropolitan area in the country, working farms, working forests, wilderness areas, wild rivers, and more. And it's for that reason that it's been designated a National Heritage Area. But when we say the Mountains to Sound Greenway, this is the landscape that we're talking about. The Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust is a nonprofit that is dedicated to conserving and enhancing that landscape. And so if you're not familiar with the range of things that we do, this slide is meant to give you some ideas. We're involved almost first and foremost in leading coalitions. We believe that the best way to care for this place is to work in collaboration across public and private sectors. So we lead coalitions. We work on land acquisition, land conservation of parks and open spaces, advocacy for public funding, trail network design and construction. We engage volunteers in taking care of trails. We engage volunteers in habitat restoration, and we've got an active environmental education program. So we run a really big gamut, but it's because there's a lot that this region kind of needs and deserves to take care of this place. All those different things that we do, we execute kind of end to end across the Greenway. So this is just a slide that gives you a little bit of a visual reminder of how diverse this place is, and the Greenway works kind of in all corners of it, from the sort of the arid lands in Kittitas County, the dry forests, the wildlands in the Cascades. This float trip you see is along the Middle Fork Snoqualmie River, I believe, urban trails, urban parks, and also rural and farm areas like this picture of Mount Si. So we really value the diversity that this landscape presents. And as our former board president, Sally Jewell, said, the Greenway is not by chance, it's by choice. And so all these wonderful places that we live in, that we celebrate, that we enjoy, are the product of people coming together and working to make sure that we conserve the natural, cultural, and historic resources that characterize this place. So that's a little bit about the Greenway and the Greenway Trust. And what I'd like to do now is speak more directly to the Heritage Area designation. And sorry, now pretty pictures are going to yield to words. The Mountains to Sound Greenway was designated by Congress as a National Heritage Area on March 12, 2019. We have become one of 55 National Heritage Areas across the country. Our literal neighbor is the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area. It was designated at the same time, and it spans our saltwater coastlines in the state of Washington to celebrate and preserve our maritime history in this part of the country. Being named a National Heritage Area is a really significant, it's a big deal. It affirms that this place is a landscape not just of significance to us that live here, but it's a landscape of national significance. The history and heritage of this place tells an important chapter in our whole country's history. We also think that it's a kind of a feather in the cap that says the cooperative approach to preserving and enhancing this landscape that we've pursued for 30 years, that it works. It's an affirmation of that. In terms of implications of designation, it authorizes federal financial support for the development and the implementation of a locally led cooperative management plan. Lots of words, but each one is important. We get some federal money, but there is no regulation on this. It's a non-regulatory designation. It really just says this is an important part of the country, and The National Park Service that administers this program is going to provide some grant funding to help the local communities, all of us here, develop a plan for how do we want to steward this place. And Congress named the Greenway Trust what they call the coordinating entity. So all National Heritage Areas are coordinated by a local entity that helps build those public-private partnerships and kind of organize activities to preserve the heritage in the landscape. Our duties as the coordinating entity, there are several. The big three are to prepare and submit a management plan, and that's what we'll share more about today. Then we get to do the fun part, which is implementing that management plan in collaboration with public and private partners like you. And then it's a little bit redundant, but it's important to emphasize public-private partnerships are kind of a central emphasis of National Heritage Areas. We really like that at the Greenway, because that's how we've worked for 30 years. When we do this, we have to consider the interests of diverse stakeholders, conduct twice yearly public meetings, and we submit annual reports and financials. So that's kind of how we get some of our accountability built in for using those federal funds. Well, what do we hope to accomplish? Now that we've been named a National Heritage Area, there are 6 goals that we have set. And to me, they all, they complement and reinforce one another. And pursuing one is usually both a means and a byproduct of pursuing others. They are to amplify this region's rich history and natural heritage, uplift tribal heritage in the region, promote pride of place and connections to nature, protect and steward our natural, cultural, and historical resources, grow funding opportunities, particularly through public-private partnerships, and promote recreation and heritage-based tourism that's positively linked to protecting those resources. So we want there to be kind of a virtuous cycle between taking care of this place and enjoying this place. Okay, let me say a little bit about the planning process, and again, how are we going to build a plan that can achieve those goals? This is a schematic of our planning process. It is nonlinear, much like the planning process proved to be. But I wanted to share this with you just to kind of give you a way to kind of mentally frame things, and this is going to help understand the preview of the plan. The heart of the management plan is really comprised of the 3 bubbles that are in the triangle shape there in the middle of the screen: themes, inventory, and interpretive plan. Kind of the critical scaffolding for defining and taking care of the Greenway is defined by the thematic framework. And it starts with themes. So themes are, we identified a set of 5 kind of big topics that collectively define the uniqueness of the Greenway, while at the same time providing lots of connection points for people to begin to understand and appreciate it. With those themes, we then can develop an inventory of the natural, cultural, and historical resources that embody and demonstrate and give you a jumping off point to learn about the themes. And then the interpretive plan helps us identify strategies for how will we help people engage with and learn about the resources and the themes. With that thematic framework in place, then we started working on strategies to preserve the resources, to implement the interpretive plan, talking with partners like you. We've been all month long, we've been doing briefings like this with different groups of partners around the Greenway to talk about commitments that they might be excited to make about how would they like to participate in the National Heritage Area. What are some projects that they might like to hold up and feature? And then from that, we start to build out an implementation plan, which will be kind of an agenda of what are some of the big projects, collective projects we want to pursue, as well as types of projects that we want to see develop across the Greenway. A couple more things about the plan. That's kind of the what of the planning process. A couple more things about the how. This planning process has been guided by a volunteer advisory committee, an NHA advisory committee. We recruited 16 volunteers from communities across the Greenway, east to west, who also brought experience in historic preservation and interpretation and tourism, as well as land and resource management and conservation. And this group has been working for almost 2 years now to develop this plan. And those almost 2 years have been extraordinary, as we all know. The very first meeting of that advisory committee was scheduled for what turned out to be about a week after the pandemic shutdowns occurred. So this is a group that's never met in person. They've only met on Zoom. And I'm so impressed and proud at the kind of their determination and their resilience to push through the conditions of the pandemic to nonetheless really lean in and have really vigorous conversations and do a lot of great thinking and figure out ways to pull in lots of people from across the Greenway through listening sessions and to get lots of input into this plan. So the advisory committee has worked for about 2 years to develop this. And like I said, we plan to have a draft plan that will circulate to partners like you for review in February. And so we're going to be really eager to sort of share the totality of the committee's thinking and work and get your feedback on it. Okay. I'm actually going to insert an extra pause here. I'm realizing that was a lot of material to present, and I want to make sure before getting into details of the management plan, let me just pause and see if anybody has questions or comments to this point. So feel free to just jump in. No? Okay. I'll keep rolling along. So here is an outline of the plan to give you a sense of what's in it. There's some front material, an executive summary, a short chapter about tribal consultation and engagement. We've been working very actively with tribes from the very beginning of the planning process, and we're committed to doing so on an ongoing basis. We also have a chapter on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our commitments to both providing a platform for stories that are oftentimes left out of the history and heritage in this region, and really kind of seeking those voices and stories. And then an introduction to the Greenway, and then here we kind of the bubbles that you saw on that chart, the thematic framework, the resource inventory, the interpretive plan, a chapter about partnerships, and then kind of the getting into the implementation plan, and then there's a business plan about how will the Greenway Trust support all this effort, and then our accountability. Thank you, Tor, for inviting chat questions. All right, so now I want to start getting in and sharing with you some of the highlights of these central chapters, starting with the thematic framework. Again, as I mentioned, there are 5 themes, and you can see them here. The eyes, voices, and teaching of the first peoples of these lands impart understanding of the heritage area from time immemorial to today. The powerful forces of geology and climate create a landscape of cultural and natural diversity across the Greenway. The Greenway provides corridors for wildlife migration, fish passage, and human travel. Human relationships with nature have shaped the landscape and the culture of the Greenway, and the cultural and natural heritage of the Greenway informs our future resilience and renewal. And I hope that as you kind of read and hear those themes, you feel like, wow, they really put arms around the breadth and the depth of what is this landscape and what is its history and the many layers of heritage. I also hope that each of these themes, even though they're short statements, makes you think of lots of specific narratives and topics that you might want to dig in on. So the landscape theme sort of, it naturally invites thinking about glaciers and ice ages, and thinking about wet forests and dry forests formed by the rain shadow of the Cascades. The relationships to nature is a place where we want to recognize the many different ways that many different people relate to nature in this landscape, starting with tribes and their traditional ways of life and relationships to the landscape, through timber and mining and sort of extractive relationships, up to now this modern area where we put a lot of emphasis on conservation and kind of recreation, outdoor recreation. All of these different relationships have and continue to have a place in the Greenway. And so each of these themes invites lots and lots of narratives. But something the advisory committee realized along the way was, in addition to those 5 themes, which are in the 5 green boxes around here, there were 4 narratives that were unique and special. Forests, salmon, Snoqualmie Pass, and what we're calling origins and arrivals. And that's really the stories of how were people here? How did they come here? And what happened? So again, starting with tribes all the way through all the different waves of immigration. But these, what we call integrated narratives, we realize are simultaneously kind of iconic to the Greenway, especially our forests and our salmon and Snoqualmie Pass. And understanding those topics naturally leads you to kind of learn about all 5 themes together. You can't understand forests without understanding the 5 themes. And we think that the best way to start to learn about those 5 themes is through one of these 4 narratives. So the themes and narratives are that critical, again, scaffolding that give us a way to kind of organize and frame. This is why the Greenway is significant. And when you start to unpack and explore these things, that's what we hope will lead you to physically explore the Greenway, appreciate the different kind of places and resources that we can find here, and begin to learn about it through interpretation and education. Let me say a little bit about resources. Natural, cultural, and historic resources in the Greenway are abundant. One of the things we quickly realized is if you just start making lists of historic registers, national registers, state registers, county registers, city registers of historic structures, historic sites, hundreds of places. And it's again, it's a reflection of the richness of this region. But it's hard to get your head around all those things at once. So to begin thinking about the NHA, the advisory committee focused on what they called bright spots. So they started to think about kind of tip of the pyramid. If you were going to start in the Greenway, where are some of the places that you might begin to understand these integrated narratives and themes? And so they looked for places that were really unique or emblematic. They were readily accessible to the public. They had integrity or intactness. And they were geographically distributed. So we didn't want to just have everything clustered in one corner of the Greenway. We wanted them spread out. And this is what that first map looks like. And there's a link on the page, and maybe it'll get pasted into the chat. This is an interactive Google map where you can go and explore it, color coded by salmon, forest, Snoqualmie Pass, and origins and arrivals. But I find this really exciting because if you can probably guess what some of these places are even without the labels. And if you had never been to the Greenway before, if somebody gave you this list and said, if you visit all these places, you'll have a much better sense, I think, of everything that the Greenway is about. And I think that's true. And I think it captures the intentions of this. And what we think will happen is, as we start to think about interpretation and activities that focus on some of these places on this map, it will kind of naturally prepare us and invite us to expand and extend those efforts to the many, many other places that we can find all around the Greenway, where you can learn about forests and salmon and Snoqualmie Pass and the people that have and continue to come to this region. All right, thanks for putting that map link in, Becca. In terms of interpretation, we've taken very much a strategic approach. So if any of you know about interpretive plans, we're not getting into the nitty-gritty detail of designing panels and specific language. Instead, we're kind of working up high, thinking about who are the audiences we want to reach, what are the goals we want to achieve, and what are some of the strategies that can be deployed to do that. And so 3 main audiences. First and foremost, residents. There are more than 2 million people that live in and around the Greenway. And if we're going to care for this place, it's those of us that live here that are the most important audience to engage and have involved. Our second audience are students, our future leaders, and Becca is our education manager, so she's an especially staunch advocate for education. And then third, visitors. We are already getting inquiries at the Greenway Trust from people from around the country that are saying, I want to come visit this new National Heritage Area. So people are coming, they want to learn about this place. We want to make sure we're prepared to support their endeavor. And 3 goals for these audiences. First, establish a sense of connection. Find a reason to appreciate this place. Second, understand it, learn something about it, see past the aesthetics and learn how did it come to be? What are some of the layers of history and heritage that you can see in this landscape? And then third, can we motivate some personal action? Can we invite people to become a volunteer, a steward, an advocate for caring for this place? And the strategies we use will be diverse for establishing a greater sense of connection, maps, itineraries, wayfinding signage, sharing about events and experiences that people can have, help people get out there and find their way. To inspire understanding, we're thinking about things like story maps, interpretive panels at different sites, educational curricula that you can start to dig in a little deeper on different places and topics. And then in terms of personal action, looking for volunteer events, citizen science activities, et cetera, opportunities that probably be mostly taken up by students and residents, but chances to get involved through nonprofits, through cities, through public agencies. There's lots of opportunities to volunteer. Kind of coming back to the beginning where we talked about public-private partnerships being essential in the Greenway. The Greenway Trust as a nonprofit was formed in 1991, and it was built on the commitment to forming partnerships between public and private sector. Our board from the very beginning has included representatives from governments and government agencies, from businesses, and from the nonprofit sector, and from community groups. And so this slide is just meant to acknowledge and reinforce that public-private collaboration that's been at play for 30 years in this region, and we hope will continue. So public sector partners include tribal governments, federal agencies, state agencies, county agencies, cities. On the private side, businesses, conservation organizations, museums and historical societies, recreation groups, education groups, DMOs, chambers. There's a plate, all of these different entities bring something to the table to help with stewarding the Greenway, interpreting the Greenway, engaging people in the Greenway. None of the things that we've accomplished over the last 30 years could have been done without partnership, and it's our kind of commitment and conviction that continuing those kinds of partnerships is our best way forward for caring for this place. You see the little thought bubble on the side there. This was my prompt to say this is one of the first questions we'd like to float out to you. If you can answer it today, we'd be thrilled. If you want or need to think about it, that's totally okay too. And that is, may we identify your city as a partner in the Greenway? We hope the answer will be a quick and easy yes. We welcome your partnership, whether you're a city that's been working with the Greenway for many years, or maybe you're just learning about us and thinking about it right now. With those partnerships in mind, and the sort of assets and capabilities and resources that public and private partners might be able to bring to an effort, the implementation plan is going to focus on identifying programs and projects that are collaborative in nature and that pursue one or more of 7 different things: protecting and enhancing resources, establishing and maintaining interpretive exhibits, developing recreational or educational opportunities, increasing public awareness, protecting and restoring historic sites and buildings, ensuring signage to public access sites and points of interest, and again, kind of coming back, promoting partnership. So we want to look for things that kind of bring public and private partners together. And we're thinking the parks, our direction as the coordinating entity has been, they want an implementation plan that's kind of identifying things that could be pursued within 5 years' time. So we're kind of thinking about what for the Greenway Trust would be a short to midterm time horizon. But we've got in mind things, I promise we've got in mind things that are 10, 20, and 30 years in duration, because we've got a long-term commitment to this place, and we want to make sure we're thinking for the long run and not just in the short run. All right. So what kinds of things are we thinking about? This is this is, again, as being preview, this is our kind of some of our current thinking, and we will welcome your questions and feedback about this. Since we're still drafting, we can capture some of your input today. One of the things we want to continue pushing on is the reassembly of the checkerboard. So in 1862, Abraham Lincoln issued the largest federal land grant for the Northern Pacific Rail Line. Every other square mile of federal lands, starting from, I think, in Montana, all the way across to the West Coast, including through what is now the Greenway, was granted to private entities who, in order to finance development of the Transcontinental Railroad. That decision in 1862 had profound impacts on this landscape that we still see today, because those railroads sold to people like Frederick Weyerhaeuser, who became the Weyerhaeuser Corporation, which led to the rise of industrial timber, which led to a checkerboard pattern of forestry, which eventually came to prove to be really inefficient and ineffective from an ecological and environmental perspective. And so conservation over the last 30 years has done a lot to kind of put that checkerboard back together. So move that checkerboard back into public ownership to make it easier to manage, more accessible to the public, and kind of address changing expectations of the landscape. So that's an example of a really big project that we want to pursue that will involve lots of individual efforts by different sets of partners all across the Greenway, trying to get those last pieces conserved. We also want to continue our efforts to complete an end-to-end trail across the Greenway. So the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail starts at Jose Rizal Park in Seattle, heads across Lake Washington to Bellevue, and we want to make sure that that gets to Issaquah and eventually to Preston and on to Snoqualmie and into North Bend, where it can meet up with the Palouse to Cascades Trail that carries on all the way across the state, and in fact is the western end of the Great American Rail Trail. So it's going to be a trail that eventually makes it all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. I think that's really, really exciting, and we've got some important work to do to fill in some critical gaps. I know someone's here from Bellevue. The Greenway Trust was so excited to be part of a ribbon cutting in the pouring rain earlier this month, where we celebrated Bellevue and WashDOT completing a trail gap right there at the Factoria interchange. Super exciting stuff. I know someone's here from Seattle. We still have a really big challenge. It's probably not going to happen in 5 years, but how to get from Jose Rizal Park to Puget Sound. There's a trail to be figured out there. These are exciting projects to work on with city partners. We also want to think about regional and community trail networks. So end-to-end trail is great, but we also want to make sure the regional trail network projects like the East Trail, projects like the Towns to Teanaway network in Cle Elum, Roslyn, and Ronald, the network formed by the Burke-Gilman Trail and the East Lake Sammamish Trail. All of those things, we want to make sure that we're investing in those to round those out and interconnect them. And also the Greenway Scenic Byway. The Interstate 90 is the central part of it is this National Scenic Byway. That's something to both celebrate and take care of. Those are sort of signature events. Underneath that, then lots of other, call them flavors of projects to be done across the Greenway. Habitat restoration, environmental education, fish and wildlife conservation, heritage events, putting together itineraries and self-guided tours for people to explore different communities and parts of the Greenway. Historic preservation. The Greenway got to do our first historic preservation project recently in Salmon Lissac above Lake Cle Elum, helping to restore a CCC era picnic shelter. So lots of different projects, and we welcome input about whole categories of projects if they're on your mind, or if you look at one of these bubbles and think about something that you might be thinking about or working on in your city, this is a great place to kind of highlight these efforts and show how they not only make a difference within your city, but they also kind of add to the overall effort of the National Heritage Area. All right, let me click through. Here are just some additional bullets. This is a list of bullets that just comes from some of the kinds of things the Greenway Trust has been proud to do in partnership with cities across the Greenway over the years. And so this maybe will also help prompt some of your own thinking and ideas. Conserving parks and open space. So, helping to write grants and raise funds and access things like the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program funding to conserve parks and open space, constructing and maintaining local trails, connecting to regional trail networks, restoring habitat in city parks. I got to take a walk in Mercer Island yesterday. I had never gotten to walk in Island Crest Park, and then a second, I think it was the 53rd Street Park. Wonderful city parks where the Greenway Trust was proud to work with the cities to both put in some trails and then work on removing invasive species and improving forest health, and just beautiful, peaceful places in the midst of communities. So those are great projects to consider. Zoning and development policies that preserve historical character, open space, access to public lands, et cetera. Mayor Pauly was just talking about some of the work they're doing on that front in Issaquah. Promoting and celebrating local heritage. Those of you in Snoqualmie Valley communities, hopefully you know about the Savor Snoqualmie initiative that the Greenway Trust has been working on with all of you to promote and celebrate the different, both the unique features and the shared heritage of the communities in that valley. And then environmental education in school districts. And Becca, I know, works with lots and lots of different teachers and lots of different schools all across the Greenway. So, and there may be other things, but these are the kinds of things that we have loved doing with cities, and we hope that we can do lots more of. And here's another one of my thought bubbles. If there are specific projects or initiatives that you're working on, or even if you're thinking about them, you're trying to figure out how might we do these. If you think that kind of pursuing those in the context of the National Heritage Area might be helpful, we would welcome the suggestion in figuring out a way for us to include that in the plan. Whoops, I jumped ahead. That was my last slide. So with that, I'll do another pause, and I think we'd be ready. Maybe you can invite any kind of big questions that people would like to put to the whole group, and otherwise we'll go into breakouts, and Becca, Tor, and I will be prepared to kind of take questions and ideas and feedback that you might have, but we can take that on. Yeah, Angela.
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. Thinking about this corridor and the kind of the wideness of it is fascinating. Just a family note, my dad's mother was an immigrant in Roslyn, and they were part of a mining community there. And so it's interesting to see that part of this, and it would be very educational to see like the history of all of the immigration in that area as well, or this whole corridor. So a couple of just, one, have you thought about adding school districts to this conversation? Because I said I see the environmental education in local school districts, and there's probably a pretty good opportunity there. And then the other question was in being a partner in this. So, sounds really exciting, but my question would be, what's the obligation in being a part of that? What does that look like for us? We definitely have some historic properties outside of urban growth boundary that could be possibly of interest, along with some of the other things we have going on with repairing of some of our streams like the Bear Creek and Sammamish and all of that. But just, I guess for me, I would want to know, like, if we say yes, then what does that mean for us? Because I'd love to say yes, but then I don't want to say, oh, and now we need this to go with.
So thank you so much for that question, because I should have said something about it earlier. I mentioned at the beginning that these designations are non-regulatory. They don't create an authority or restrictions or authorizations of anything. They are instead voluntary. So the emphasis on partnerships is because everything about National Heritage Areas is done voluntarily by groups that want to get together to work on these things. So I would say that your obligation to being a partner is none, in terms of it doesn't put you on the hook for anything. Rather, what we're looking for is saying, I want to be part of this and kind of come in good faith to look for opportunities to work in collaboration on things. And I think the track record of the Greenway Trust over 30 years of working with all levels of government, myriad businesses, lots of nonprofits, oftentimes finding ways for deeply divergent views to come together and find some common ground. I would hope that it's the kind of table that they'd love to come and sit at and see what we can do together. So I would say obligation is none, invitation in to kind of seek cooperative approaches is what's sought. Thanks for asking that, because that's an important one.
John or Becca, do you want to speak just briefly to the school districts and our involvement with districts?
Becky, you want? Well, I'll say that's a great suggestion. We have not done any briefings this month with school districts, but Becca, maybe you can talk about ways in which you are plugged in with school districts broadly.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short, and I'll keep it short and sweet. The Greenway Education Program, which turns 25 next year, works with school districts across the Greenway, but largely in King County to teach kids about salmon and forest ecosystems and other related topics through classroom lessons, field trips, and restoration projects. So we have, at least pre-pandemic, and it will start again, I know it will someday soon, a really great, robust school year program for 4th through 12th graders. And then in the summertime, we partner with a couple different groups to run 2 different high school internship programs that are paid opportunities for high school students to get some real world experience related to, oh no, am I frozen? Oh no, okay, great. Real world experience related to restoration ecology and clean water systems.
Let's maybe jump into breakouts and maybe take 10 minutes and just give people a chance in a smaller group to reflect, and if they want to circle back on parts of the plan or raise other issues, we'd really welcome any feedback you might have today. And it's hard to do in a big set of boxes. Welcome back, everybody. That went really, really fast. Hopefully the other groups had good discussions as well. Do we want to do a little bit of, let me ask this, any highlights that any of the 3 breakout rooms would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to go first. And anyone who's in my breakout room, please feel free to add on, correct what I share here. There's a lot of great questions that came up, and I appreciated that some were sort of specific nitty-gritty questions and some were forward-looking and process related. So we had a nice variety of questions. Some questions about different kinds of partners, and Paul asked about the SEPA review, which tested my personal knowledge, which was great. And a question about our tribal consultation and engagement and the grants program were some of the highlights that came up for me.
Stop.
Excellent.
And John, I'm happy to jump in and just acknowledge that great conversation with folks. And, you know, Mark noted the excitement over the Towns to Teanaway work that's happening and the collaborative effort that's happening in that area. Mike, I thought I asked a really good question, and maybe it's something you could address here as well. And that was the question of the benefits of participation. You know, kind of what's the nitty gritty? What's in it for the municipalities? How do they benefit from being involved in the process? And I had my own answer, but maybe you could, you know, jump in and I can put you on the spot on that one.
Sure. And I'll say that that was a topic that came up in the group I was in too, was just kind of talking about, like, it's, how do we go back and kind of sell others in our city on this and what comes of it? Before I answer that to you, also, I kind of like Becca, I think a mix of some specific things and some broad general things. So yeah, I was excited about, thinking about on a ongoing process base, how can we have meetings of cities on a more regular basis so that it doesn't just happen once in a blue moon? And also just the opportunity to just assembling lists of some of the resources that people know are out there, but no one's ever kind of put them in one easy spot for visitors to find and use. That was a great idea. Back on the kind of the what's in it for cities, the benefits sort of thing. One of the things we ended up talking about, and Tor and Becca, this could be a to-do list for the Greenway Trust, is we've, over the last 30 years, for sure, but even in recent past, we've done so many different things with so many different cities, and maybe just if we would do a better job of keeping a nice little roster that we could share, so that Devin knew in her role, City of Seattle, sure would be nice if we had an easy list of these are the principal things that we've been doing with the City of Seattle. And that's a nice way to recognize and acknowledge the breadth of partnerships that we have in place, and also to identify who are some of the right people that might be involved in meetings and what else might we do, sort of thing. So I think, and then we also talked a little bit about, well, what if we had a kind of an annual city summit? And that could be a time where everybody, we create a way for everybody to come and share what are the things you've accomplished this year that are contributing to the NHA, and there's a time to kind of celebrate and recognize. And what are some of the things that you're looking at in the next year? What are some of the challenges we're facing? And it's an opportunity to both to share what's on the horizon and what you're pursuing, and then maybe where there's opportunities for collaboration or there's a shared challenge, there's an opportunity to kind of debug together. I think that is maybe the principal benefit of being involved in the Greenway, is just coming to the table with other cities, other partners, and reaping the benefit of diverse viewpoints and perspectives and experiences, leaning in on kind of a shared commitment to place and each of our kind of individual views on it and scopes of responsibility, and finding ways to work together in order to achieve things that we can't do by ourselves. So that would be kind of my answer to the what's in it for cities thing. It's a little bit intangible, but I think that the Greenway that we see today is the evidence that you need, that when people collaborate on things, we can do some pretty cool stuff that spans boundaries of what any one organization does. Yeah, Mary Lou.
Yeah, I want to add to that, John. I think there's a huge benefit in that many hands approach, that there's so many things that the city of Issaquah wants to do. But with our population and size, we can't unless we have big partners. And so we get to run things at a much larger scale when there's a project, because we're helping you organize and promote it. And I get a lot of feedback afterwards on videos, pictures, and of the work that's done. So there's definitely tangible benefits that we can share through pictures and stuff. And we just couldn't the kinds of stuff we're doing without you.
John, one other area that I talked about, or we talked about collectively, was just the benefit of this place being identified and the grant opportunities that come along with that, and how much further that goes when you're supporting something that is already in motion rather than something that's kind of vague out there and is in a special place.
Yeah. Yeah, two flavors of that, just to speak to a little bit more. One is, the Mountains of Sound Greenway is a National Heritage Area. That it's been designated, and that's a really cool thing. And because of that, now there's, that's yet another kind of feature to why is a project here important compared to a project somewhere else when you're applying to grants. And anecdotally, one of what I think is the first big wins of the designation came when the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest and the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest, which sit on either sides of the Snoqualmie Pass within the Greenway, put together a joint proposal for a whole several years of deferred maintenance projects to be funded under the Great American Outdoors Act. So putting together like Great American Outdoors Act to address deferred maintenance across public lands across the country. These two forests got together and they put together a package of projects organized within the Mountains to Sound Greenway National Heritage Area. And that proposal was the #1 ranked proposal in the Forest Service. And so those two Forest Service partners were able to win some really important and much needed funding that benefits all of us, because so many of us recreate in the national forests, simply because that designation created an identity to these places, as opposed to we're cobbling together two sets of projects from two different forests. So that's, I think, an early win of just the existence of the Greenway had a positive influence. The other thing, and I see Mark Knoll asked about this too, we do get some federal financial support with the designation, and if we can get the management plan approved, that financial support increases. And one of the things that I want us to do with that federal financial support is to create a small grants program. A lot of other NHAs do this to great effect, but can we put together a grants program that provides some financial support to support the kinds of work we've been talking about today in historic preservation and recreational educational opportunities and interpretation and signage and partnerships, and have that be a resource that we can hopefully kind of have locally to supplement the funding that we're all pursuing for various projects. So I'm hoping that's also a small benefit that we offer.
John, I'll just highlight one other issue that really came up in our conversation as well, and just the challenges associated with population growth and that balance between growth and conservation and sustainability and all that goes along with that, and providing a forum for, difficult conversations around what that all means.
Yep. Yeah, I'll say as anecdote, I did a series of briefings much like this with leadership from several of the public agencies, and I did them separately with them, and almost to a T, they all raised that issue of, what are you thinking? How is the NHA designation going to help with addressing the impacts of outdoor recreation on natural resources and the environment and tribal treaty rights and all these things? So yes, this is sort of an inescapable challenge that we have in front of us. Is we have this region where the population has grown so significantly, and even faster than the population growth has been the growth in people enjoying outdoor recreation because of all these amazing parks and trails and public lands that we have here. And how do we make sure we don't love it to death and kind of ruin this great thing we have? I don't know what the answer is per se, but I have faith and conviction that the approach of the Greenway is a means for us to find that answer. And one of the reasons I think about it is that going back to the origin story of the Greenway, if you haven't heard it before, in the summer of 1990, July 4th week of 1990, 75 kind of concerned citizen activists organized by the Issaquah Alps Trails Club marched, and I do it in air quotes, from Snoqualmie Pass to the Seattle waterfront over about a week's time. It wasn't really a march because there wasn't really a trail. So there are stories of having to kind of rappel down one side of a ravine and then climb up the other because the old railroad trestle was too dangerous to walk across. what is now the Palouse to Cascades Trail, a wonderful place to ride your bike, was still railroad cobble, things like that. But they marched to raise awareness of the idea of this corridor, the importance of protecting it, because they were worried about urban sprawl and the pace of growth in the Seattle metropolitan area just overrunning things. Fast forward 30 years and the Seattle metropolitan area is growing faster than it was then. And the amount of conservation that we've been able to put in place, the amount of natural areas and parks and trails that have been protected is dramatically greater. So somehow or another, we did a pretty good job of it for 30 years. And I think that if we continue that approach of that collaborative approach, we can find our way through to it again as we kind of keep bringing more people to the table to figure out how might we do this. These are really very real issues that demand our attention, and I think we can find our way if we're at the table together. Soapbox, dismount. Any others? Well, people think about it. I'm going to pull my screen back up.
So I actually have a suggestion. It would be helpful for the city of Ellensburg, if you want our participation, to get a letter to respond to rather than just the verbal.
Yeah.
Then I can take it to my council and ask the question and have an official endorsement.
Okay.
I don't have any power by myself.
Okay. That's very helpful. And Nancy, if I may, you're a perfect segue to I did have one last slide I wanted to share with you all that I think you answered one of the questions for me, or at least process-wise. So since we're coming up on the end of our time, I just want to share some next steps with you and leave you with two more questions. One, in terms of next steps, we've been using January to preview the plan with partners. The draft has been kind of going through the internal reviews, and we've also been gathering and incorporating input from tribal consultations in parallel with all this. Our plan is to circulate a draft for partner review, and I'll say something about the public comment in a moment, circulate the draft plan for partner review in February. So hopefully next week, we will have a draft plan ready and be able to circulate it with all of you or others that you might recommend for review. And then we'll take that feedback in, and we're actually going to turn we want to take the partner review in and update the plan after we've had the benefit of that review. And then we'll do a public comment phase. So there'll kind of be, you really have two bites at the apple on the review process, but we'll do a public comment period in March and then submit the plan in April. And the two thought bubble questions on this page are, would you like to review the plan? We want to make sure that we've got you on the mailing list. We will likely use an online review tool that makes it really easy to share the plan and to comment on the plan. It will also make it really easy if you say you'd like to review it and someone on your team would also like to review it. It makes it really easier for you to share it with them too. So, and then the second question is, would you consider submitting a letter of support? And so Nancy, thank you for letting us know that making that request formally is the way to do that. And so we can figure out a way to do that. And we might just do that broadly, where we'll submit the plan to all of you so that you can see it. And then we might follow that up with a formal request of first question earlier in the presentation was, can we list you as a partner? That was one of the questions that came up in my group too, was what's the obligation? What are you on the hook for? The good news is nothing, because these plans are voluntary. The spirit of the Greenway has been, and the conduct of the NHA will be one of voluntary cooperation. So being a partner doesn't put you on the hook for anything, but we hope it's something you want to do because it's something that is going to be helpful to the things that you and your city are trying to do, and you'd be excited about making a contribution to the National Heritage Area effort. And the second question if there were any projects you'd like to feature. So we got some great ideas today during discussion. If you think of other things, please feel free to email Becca, Tor, or I. We will always welcome input. And we're going to be excited in a week to share a plan with you all and get your feedback on it. We hope that what you saw today resonates pretty positively, and that when you get to see it built out, that you get more excited. And we also trust you'll have some good feedback for us to take on board. Any other parting thoughts or comments from folks? I really thank you for joining us today and taking the time and sharing the questions and ideas that you already had. Yeah, Angela.
I put it in the chat, but sometimes we get asked for letters of support and we're all drafting our own. Is it more valuable to get lots of letters or one letter with a lot of signers?
Oh, I'll ask our park service liaison what they prefer. What they had told us was that letters of support are helpful, but they didn't. I'm not sure that they fully appreciated how. I mean, when we were working on the designation, we had, I think, 6,000 letters and petition signers. So, I mean, more than half of those were petition signers, but I'm not sure they know how many letters the Greenway supported sent in last time. So I'll check with them. And one way or the other, if we ask for a letter of support, we'll also provide a template. So we'll try to make it really easy if it's something you'd like to do. We'll try to make it really easy to respond to that.
Thank you. That's what I was trying. Something easy. Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
All right. And I'm seeing lots of things in the chat about reviewing the plan and everything. That's great. Mayor Pauly, do you want to say anything in conclusion to wrap us up today?
Yeah, thanking everybody for coming. We have a lot of different types of agencies and cities here as well. And I think the comments and the questions in the presentation were all really well done. So thank you, John, and all the Mountains of Sound Greenway staff for answering our questions and providing us information. It looks like it's going to be an exciting document. It sounds like we're all ready and excited to review it and sign on to letters. So thank you all for coming today. And thanks to all the Mountains of Sound Greenway staff.
Thank
Have
you
a great
all
day,
very
everybody.
much.
Thank you all.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.